Hi folks, Tim Newman with Lite Studios, and believe it or not, even though it's the second day in a row, we're bringing you another mastering Photoshop video. The reason we're coming at this again so quickly is because I feel like we had a really good solid start with the introduction to luminosity masks in Photoshop. But we didn't want that first video to go on too long and to really oversaturate you. So what we want to do today is take a look at building more onto where we left off and making more granular masks that give you a finer level of editing control. Let's dive back into Photoshop and continue where we left off. Turns out our Photoshop example for this video will take us back to right where we left off in the introduction to luminosity masks part 1. And you can see here we have our image loaded up in the background layer here in this document. And it appears to me that we have a brightness contrast adjustment layer here with the Midtones luminosity mask applied. And if we want to confirm that, we can hover right over the mask icon here in the channel strip, and we can hold down the Option key on the Mac, the Alt key on Windows, and click on that, and here you can see the actual mask that's stored for this adjustment layer. So there you go. Certainly looks like a Midtones mask to me. All right, Alt or Option key, depending on whether you're Mac or Windows, click on the mask icon again in the channel strip, and you are restored back to the standard image view that we would expect to see here in this tab. All right, this is going to seem counterproductive, but drag this adjustment layer into the trash. We're going to take this image and put it back the way it was before we got started. And then what I would like you to do is go over to the channels strip. And in the channel strip, I'm just going to double click on history down here to give us a little more room. In the channel strip, you can see that we do indeed have a brights alpha channel, a darks alpha channel, and a midtones alpha channel. Now, I want to make luminosity masks that are a little more granular than these three are here. And to get prepared to do that, to keep them all straight later, I'm going to come up here to this Brights luminosity mask. I'm going to double click on the word Brights. You can see that it highlights in your editing color of choice. That indicates that this field has been selected and it's now editable. You can see that because of the open text box here. And you can start retyping and everything that's highlighted will disappear, or you can simply use the right arrow key, put a space in there, and let's call this Brights 01. I'm going to hit an enter. Now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to do the same thing here on the darks alpha channel or darks luminosity mask. Double click on it, right key to take me past the selected text, space 01, and this is now the darks 01 alpha channel or luminosity mask. I'm going to come up here and click on the RGB channel strip just to bring things back to the way they were without us having the luminosity mask displayed. And our picture is once again back. And now we're going to take a look at creating a little narrower scope of mask here for the brights and the darks. Now you might recall if we came up to the RGB channel strip, and don't do this, just watch for a second, and we hold down the Command key on the Mac, Control key on Windows, we are going to get a selection of pixels that are greater than 50% luminosity in the image. That would be our brights mask that we eventually created from that selection. If we come down here to the actual alpha channel itself and we hold down the Command or the Control key, depending on whether you're on Mac and Windows, and click on that, we are actually reloading the brights mask into a selection that we can see. So this, when we click on this with that Command key in the Mac or Control key on Windows, brings back the selection that's stored here in this alpha channel. Now, what we would like to do is intersect that selection with itself. And this requires us using some modifier keys to make this happen. So on the Mac, it's going to be Command, Shift, Option. On Windows, that would be a Control, Shift, Alt. And you'll notice that we have our little square selection icon over the pointer icon, but you'll also notice in the center of it we have an X, and that X means that whatever we load up out of this channel is going to intersect with the active selection. In this case, we're basically taking this Brights 01 channel, having already loaded it, and intersecting it with itself. And you'll notice our selection does indeed become smaller, and it certainly looks like it's focused on the brighter areas in the image than Brights 01 was. So we're going to come down here to our icon here, which allows us to take the current selection and add it as a channel. And we're going to double click on the word Alpha 1 here for our new channel. So we have that available to edit its label, and we're going to type Brights. Still can't type any better today than I did last night. This is going to be Brights 02. And if you're used to keeping your layers organized, you can do the same thing with channels. I'm going to put Brights 02 above Brights 01. So there you go. Now we have, you can see here's our Brights 01 channel. I've just clicked on that. You can see that's covering a fairly large swath of the luminosity in the image. We go to Brights 02. You can see that the lightest areas in this mask have certainly reduced in size, and there is less area in the image overall that is going to be affected when this mask is applied, say for instance, to an adjustment layer. Okay, we're going to do a Command D on the Mac, Control D on Windows to get rid of the selection we just made. We are going to now come up here, hover over Brights 02, hold down the Command key on the Mac, Control key on Windows, and we are going to reload that selection. In all reality, we are reloading what we just deleted a second ago, but I wanted you to see this step of loading this up. Then on the Mac, we're going to do a Command Shift Option. On Windows, that would be a Control Alt Shift. And if we click on the Brights 02 channel again, we are going to get an even smaller selection. In fact, it takes us a second to dig it out here, but it's over here on the horizon with the sun. And that, if we click on this icon again to add this current selection as a channel, is going to become, if we double click on the word Alpha 1 here and retype, it's going to become our Brights 03 channel. And I'm going to again take this and drag it up above the Brights 02 channel so they're in order. So I'm going to do a Command D on the Mac, Control D on Windows to undo this selection. And here is a mask literally targeting some of the brightest areas in the image and ignoring a lot of the midtones and darks. This is a little bit wider range of luminosity here. It's going to target a little more of the brights in the image, and this one is getting a lot of the brights in the image. In fact, as we recall, everything that's 50% luminosity or brighter. Okay, so now real quick, there you go. We have 3 different Brights masks that we've loaded up. Now it's possible that we can keep loading up these alpha channels and intersecting themselves with each other and then coming up with a Brights 04 and a Brights 05. But at some point, we are going to get down to a level of granularity that really is no longer effective in terms of editing. That is going to be dependent upon the image. You know, if you have an image that's leaning towards a lot of brights, well, then maybe a Brights 04, even a Brights 05 might be beneficial. And then if you have an image that doesn't have a lot of brights at all, well, then it's going to be harder to make these Brights 04 and Brights 05 luminosity masks and have them be beneficial to you. All right, now that we've done that, let's take a look at doing the same thing with the darks. I'm going to turn on the RGB channel strip again, putting all of those various masks away and turning them off. I'm going to come down here and hover over the darks 01 alpha channel here, that darks 01 luminosity mask. I'm going to again on the Mac hold down the Command key, Windows Control key, and I am going to load the selection that represents all of the darker areas in the image. And remember from our very first introduction, these are areas that are less than 50% luminosity in them. And just like we did with the brights, we are going to do a Command Shift Option on the Mac or a Control Shift Alt on Windows and intersect with the same darks layer that we just used to create this mask. And you will see now we have a completely different selection. This looks a little bit odd when you look at this one compared to what happened with the brights. But I think the point here is that this image is generically leaning more towards the dark side than it is towards the bright side. And so we would expect to see a selection like this where there are lots of dark areas selected. Let's go ahead and click on our icon down here to add this as a channel. We're going to double click on this new Alpha 1 channel and we're going to call it Darks 02. My typing tonight is so flawed. And just to keep things in order, I'm going to put this Darks 02 layer below the Darks 01. Now remember last time I had us do a Command D or a Control D to undo that selection before we moved on to the Brights 03. We don't really have to do that like I said before. I can continue that intersection right here on the Mac with a Command Shift Option, on Windows with a Control Shift Alt, and click on that Darks 02 alpha channel again. And now you can see that I get an even smaller range of areas selected in that mask. I'm going to double click on our Add New Channel icon, and I'm going to double click the resulting Alpha 1 channel and call this Darks 03. And just because we still have a reasonable amount selected here, I'm going to do the same thing one more time. I'm going to hover over the Darks 03, and on the Mac it's going to be a Command Shift Option. On Windows that's going to be a Command Shift Alt, and I'm going to intersect with Darks 03 and create yet another Darks mask. See, now this time, unlike with the brights, because of this image, we do have, albeit very small, a selection of really fine-grained darks areas here. So I'm going to click on that Add New Channel icon again. That takes our existing selection and turns it into a new alpha channel. I'm going to double click on this new Alpha 1 that got created. I'm going to call this Darks 04. Hey, finally one typed without an error. All right, there we go. Now we can work our way through this. Here's the brightest areas in the image. Not so bright. A little less bright. Those are our kind of 50% tonality. Darker images, even darker area in there, even darker tones in there, and really dark tones in there. You can see this is targeting a very narrow area in the image. All right, Command D or Control D to undo that selection depending on whether a Mac or Windows. Let's bring up the RGB channel strip again, and let's head back over to the Layers control panel. From here, let's step out of Photoshop for a little bit and discuss what we've accomplished so far in this tutorial. So at this point, we've built a bunch of additional masks as alpha channels that are luminosity based. And I think you'll agree that they give us a lot more granularity than we had in just the brights, darks, and the mid-tone masks that we originally started off with. Now, before we wrap up here, we're going to take a look at doing some unique things with mid-tone masks. So let's jump back in here to Photoshop for just a little bit longer. I'm going to show you some interesting tricks with mid-tone masks, and then we'll wrap up in this section of the video. Back to Photoshop. Okay, so here we are back in Photoshop, and as I said, we are now going to spend a little bit of time thinking about midtones and midtone luminosity masks in Photoshop. It's something that we've neglected up to this point, and in all reality, it tends to get neglected by a lot of Photoshop editors. And it's too bad because mid-tone luminosity masks can offer a lot of punch to an image if used the right way. Okay, so we're going to jump back over here to the channel's control panel. And if you remember, we built a mid-tones luminosity mask in our very first tutorial. And there it is. And what we're going to do here is we're going to double click on this, and we're going to do just like we have done with the brights and the darks. We're going to rename this to Midtones 01. And we're going to turn the RGB channel strip back on. Now, what I want you to think about is how we built the very first Midtones mask that we have here right now, Midtones 01. We selected the entire image, and then we subtracted brights and darks from that image, and that left us with this band of luminosity in the middle that makes up that Midtones 01 mask. Well, we're going to do a fairly similar thing here. With the RGB channel strip turned on, we are going to do a Command A, Control A on Windows, and as you might recall, that selects all the luminosity in the picture. And instead of subtracting brights 01 and darks 01, we are now going to subtract brights 02 and darks 02. So we're going to hover over the brights 02 channel strip, and on the Mac, we're going to do the Command Option keystroke combination. That is a Control Alt for you Windows users, and you will see that we now get the selection icon over the pointer icon, but we have a minus sign in the middle of that icon. That tells us that we are going to subtract what we are about to load up from the selection that is already active. So we're clicking on that, and boom, you can see we took a bunch of stuff away from that overall selection of all the luminosity in the picture. Now we're going to go down to darks 01, and we are going to hold down the Command Option keystroke combination on the Mac. That's Control Alt again for you Windows users, and we are going to subtract darks 02. Gives us a very interesting selection. Hard to visualize what it is, but remember, if we come down here and we click on our icon to add this selection as a channel, you will see that we now get a new Alpha 1 channel. If we make that channel active, and in fact, let's do a Command D for Mac users, Control D for Windows users to take that active selection away. You can see that, in fact, it is a much lighter midtone map. So here's Midtones 01, and here's Alpha 01. I'm going to double click on Alpha 01, and I'm going to call it Midtones 02. Wow, 2 labels in a row typed without spelling errors. I am on a roll now. So there you go. You have a second midtone mask. We can repeat that process again. Let's turn our RGB channel strip back on. Command A to select everything. This time we are going to subtract brights 03. Again, Command Option on the Mac, Control Alt on Windows. There's brights 03 taken out. And we're going to come down here to darks 03. Again, Command Option on Windows, Control Alt. Back up. Command Option on the Mac, Control Alt on Windows. And we're going to subtract darks 03. And again, we're going to click on our icon to take the selection and turn it into an alpha channel. And if we make that alpha channel active, you can see, wow, that's a really bright midtones mask. And we'll do a Command D on the Mac, Control D on Windows to clean that up. Double click on the Alpha 1 label. We're going to make this Midtones, back to my old typing habits, 03. So now we have 3 different midtones channels. And undoubtedly, there's a little overlap in some of these luminosity levels between these different brights, darks, and midtones masks, but that's okay. This gives us a real nice band of luminosity in the center to work with. These give us a real nice set of darks to work with. And last but not least, we have a real nice set of brights to work with. So there you have it. I mean, we've pretty quickly built up 10 different luminosity channels here. And once you get used to doing this, you realize that, you know, heck, there's only about 3 or 4 keystroke combinations you have to remember to do this. So there you go. Now, one last point here. We won't demonstrate this here. Maybe we'll hold this off for another video. But we don't have to subtract evenly on both sides of the midtones. We could, in fact, build a selection of everything and take out brights 02 on one side and darks 03 on the other side. And that would shift our midtones more to one side versus the other from the center of the image, if you will. Again, a lot of these selections are really based on the overall luminosity levels within the image, and you're going to have to learn as you go along which ones you want to grab, how many granular luminosity levels you want to make, and how you want to use them. But hopefully this gives you a real good idea of how to pick out brights, darks, and midtones and make luminosity masks for them. All right, we'll see you on the other side. We'll have a quick wrap up and then we're out of here. All right, so there you have it, folks. The basic concepts behind building a lot of granular luminosity masks as alpha channels in Photoshop. Now, I know this probably leaves you wanting more because we haven't really done a lot with editing with these masks yet, but this is really a great first start. Now, as a kind of offshoot here, keep an eye out in the near future for another video that we're going to do showing some tools and plugins that automate a lot of this luminosity mask building process that we just did. Now, I think those tools and plugins are really handy, and in fact, once I mastered making luminosity masks on my own, I preferred those tools because I think they make the whole process a little bit quicker. But I'm really glad that I learned the manual approach because I understand what these masks represent and how they work. And I think that concept is really important. And I think you'll agree when we start jumping into the editing section of this, when we start applying these masks, that you will really appreciate understanding how those masks were built and exactly what they represent to you, the user. Well, that's it for this video. Remember, get that subscribe button down there at the bottom so you can see the next ones as we bring them to you. We're really excited about this series. We have a lot of other stuff coming at you soon here as well. I think things are starting to hit full speed ahead, as we say. And remember, as we always say, learning equals skills. Practice equals mastery. We'll see you out there.